I was Stanley's unforgettable first love. But on the 999th day of our marriage, he grew tired of me again. So, at my birthday party, he brought his new mistress to me. "The girl is pregnant, you should move out of the master bedroom for her. Oh, and the condoms at home haven't been used for a long time, I'm afraid they're expired, go buy some new ones for me." Everyone around was watching my humiliation, and I once again proposed divorce. Stanley mocked without hiding, "You're already 30, at an age where even matchmaking can't find you a man who would take you. What's the use of saying these angry words? Just be obedient, and the three of us can live together happily." In the past, I indeed couldn't leave him, but this time I was serious. All eyes in the room were on me, while Stanley sat in the corner of the sofa, swirling his wine glass, and without restraint, bit the lips of the girl beside him. At that moment, the phone rang, and Stanley spoke. "Mom, your daughter wants to divorce me again." There was a half-second silence on the other end. But soon, my phone rang. With a hand that felt as heavy as 1,000 pounds, I answered, my lips dry as I said, "Mom." My mother immediately started scolding me, and then I heard Stanley sneer. "You little bastard, how dare you mention divorce again? When you come back this time, I'll beat you to death. Your husband is so good, what are you making a fuss about every day? Men will always make mistakes. You're living off him. Listen to me, turn on the video, I want to see you apologize." A bitter, suffocating feeling surged from my chest, and the pain from past beatings by my mother spread through my body again. I struggled to walk to Stanley and asked, "Don't you want a divorce?" He didn't speak. I choked back my emotions and said to my mother, "Mom, after the divorce, I can still get property and support you." Stanley's expression changed, his dark eyes showing a familiar seriousness. "Are you serious? Do you think I married you without preparation? All my property is under my brother's name, you won't get a penny." An overwhelming chill rose up my spine. Everyone assumed my marriage to Stanley was a luxury, yet he kept me at a distance. When I fell ill and was hospitalized, he handed me the bills. When depression forced me to quit my job, he pushed me to find work and share household expenses, saying he wanted to preserve our perfect romance by freezing me in my most confident, independent year. Yet now, for this young girl before us, he shattered those notions time and again. A single piece of her clothing was worth 3 months of my salary. Upon reflection, I let out a hollow laugh. After all these years, hadn't I seen it clearly? My mother's urging voice still echoed in my ears, but I stood motionless. Stanley grew impatient, his thin lips pressed tight, irritation flashing in his eyes. "Enough, apologize to me, and we'll let this matter drop." Stanley held a cigarette between his lips, his dark eyes brooding. "Marilyn is still pregnant and can't handle the stress. Let's discuss this later." Silently, I turned and went upstairs, then returned dragging a suitcase to stand before Stanley. "I've left the divorce papers in your study, remember to sign them." Ashes from Stanley's cigarette fell to the floor, his hands seemingly trembling. I ignored it, casting one final, deep glance at the young girl. Her face glowed with youthful collagen, her simple makeup fresh and refined. In her, I saw a reflection of my younger self. "You can use all my things, they're new. Also, the perfume is too strong, he doesn't like it." From the moment Stanley grew tired of me, I knew this day would come. I was never destined to be the one to tame a wayward heart. As I stepped out the door, a strong force yanked me back. "You can leave, but repay what I lent your family." "How much?" Stanley reverted to his casual demeanor. "Not much, 1 million. I clutched my throat as he nonchalantly pulled the girl into his arms. "As my wife, I'd help you, but since you're not anymore, why should I? If you regret it, you can kneel and beg me." On the day Stanley and I married, my mother extorted 50,000 from him. Losing face, his attitude toward me soured even on our wedding night. For nearly 3 days and nights, Stanley vented his frustration on me until I landed in the hospital. That day, he smoked endlessly, and I saw exhaustion in his eyes. "Nina, were you fucking sold to me?" Recalling that time, my heart still ached briefly, but now, I no longer cared. I picked up my phone and transferred 50,000 to him. "This is a deposit, I'll repay the rest gradually." Stanley's dark gaze fixed on me. "Nina, are you serious?" "Fine, but your family owes me more than this. Take off the clothes I bought you now, and we'll call it even." It was late autumn, and the warm air in the house couldn't dispel the chill in my heart. I began removing my top as several people's breathing grew heavy. I married Stanley thanks to the looks that captivated him at first sight. As my hand reached my skirt's waistband and my clothes fell, a firm force wrapped me in a blanket. I saw Stanley's eyes, blazing with fury. "You fucking lost your mind. Everyone, close your eyes. No one says a word about this." Stanley's rage was terrifying, and the others, being wise, promptly left our home. Only Stanley and Marilyn beside him witnessed my disgrace. "Call it even?" I tilted my head back, refusing to let tears fall. My tears had dried up the day Stanley cheated. "Stop pretending in front of me. Don't you just want to provoke me?" "What then? I'm supposed to revolve around you." Stanley's face darkened as if he wanted to strangle me. Stanley didn't believe me, thinking I was trying to manipulate him. "I'm truly letting go. Let's divorce." He pressed his palm menacingly against my neck. "You fucking dare to divorce me? Who in all of Beijing doesn't know you're mine? Who else could you turn to? Back then, I loved you, but your family wore out my patience long ago. I spared them for your sake, but if you leave, you won't like the consequences. Nina, why aren't you one of us?" My heart turned cold instantly. I'd heard this too many times. Stanley's obsession with it drove him mad. We were wrong from the start. Seeing my silence, he grabbed my hand to touch Marilyn's belly. "See this? If your family weren't so repulsive, I wouldn't have denied you a child." My frozen heart ached numbly again. I'd been pregnant once, but Stanley refused it, fearing my mother would use the child to extort him forever. We were from different worlds. I shouldn't have hoped. I looked at the timid young girl. "Stanley will treat you and the child well." Stanley's anger deflated suddenly. He covered his face and laughed. "You're fucking asking for it. Fine, go close the door." He began tearing at my clothes recklessly. My hand trembled as I saw Marilyn's red eyes. I pushed him in panic, but his hands didn't stop. "Weren't you screaming with pleasure before? Now you can't need me to teach you?" He shoved me aside roughly, pulling Marilyn onto the bed. My face paled sickeningly, but Stanley's panting filled my ears. "Go get me a condom." With my eyes closed, I fumbled to hand it to him, but Stanley no longer needed it. Marilyn's cry of pain rang out. "Stanley, my baby." I bit my lip hard, standing there all night. At dawn, my legs gave out, and I collapsed to the floor. The room reeked heavily, yet Stanley ordered me to clean it. "Didn't you used to serve me like this? Now you can't?" Enduring piercing pain silently, every inch of the room's stench pressed on my nerves. "Let me go." Stanley laughed again, locking me in the room to reflect. At midnight, my body grew cold, trembling all over. Pain made me sweat profusely. Though the noise from the next room grew louder, my knocking was still heard. Stanley entered and saw my frail state, his breathing uneven. "Nina, what trick are you playing now?" Pain shook even my breaths. "Take me to the hospital." I knelt, pleading, utterly humbled. Seeing my pain-blurred face, Stanley instinctively reached out, but someone behind hugged him. "Brother Stanley, it's my fault. I was too fussy, causing her to fall ill." "How else could it be so convenient, right when you wanted another round?" Stanley's clenched fist loosened, his gaze turning to disgust. "Nina, since when do you lie like this? I made it clear before. I'm not breaking up with you. you can accept Marilyn and join us." I stopped looking at him as Stanley locked the door tight. Seeming to vent, the shouts outside grew louder. Propping myself up, I dialed a random number. "Whoever you are, please come to Stanley's villa to save me." I had a dream of the year Stanley and I married, of the day he proposed, his promises to me. Just as I sought a response, the scene shifted to Stanley hysterically hating me. "Nina, we're indeed not suited for marriage just for a lifetime of dating. Why can't you become what I want?" Amid overwhelming sorrow and regret, I awoke to find myself in a hospital. The doctor, seeing me stir, showed a flash of delight. "You're awake?" I swallowed hard. "Who brought me here?" The doctor shyly pointed outside. A man entered, his cold eyes warming upon seeing me awake. Awake? Was it worth nearly dying for a man? I caught the mockery in his tone but couldn't be bothered to explain. The man fell silent, seemingly angry. "Think it over. If you truly want a divorce, you can find me anytime." Before I could react, his handsome face loomed close, refined features, sensual lips making my heart skip a beat. "Who are you?" He smiled charmingly. "You called me don't know who I am?" I froze. Due to work, I'd saved countless numbers, but this man left no impression. He chuckled softly, almost to himself. "I knew it. Since you're awake, don't you have anything to say to me?" I shook my head. Having nearly died, my heart suddenly calmed. Regarding Stanley, I'd even considered dying to fulfill him. Yet mundane ties held me back. Now felt like the perfect time. I called my mother, firmly addressing the divorce. "I'm truly exhausted. If this continues, we'll all suffer." My mother said nothing, silently transferring me 200,000, labeled dowry. My eyes instantly reddened. Declining the man's offer to take me back, I sought Stanley alone. Stanley still held Marilyn in his arms as I placed the divorce papers before him. "Yesterday's process didn't complete. Sign today." Once, I'd have questioned him, calling his professed love a joke. I thought his infidelity was fleeting, that he'd one day return to me. So when he asked me to take the lead, I learned to please him. But his repeated betrayals left me hopeless. Perhaps he'd long stopped needing me. Stanley glared at me mockingly. "Nina, you're more capable than I thought, getting him to take you away. What else don't I know about you?" I frowned in confusion, but Stanley slap-struck. My mouth numbed instantly. As I tried to speak, another slap drew blood from my lips. The ruthlessness in Stanley's eyes startled me as he yanked my hair, dragging me to the floor. "I gave you face because you were my woman. Now that you've betrayed me, I can deal with you." "Do you know who that was?" "Perry, my own brother. You're quite skilled." A ringing filled my ears, and I forgot to breathe. So it was Perry. No wonder he could take me away. I opened my mouth to speak, but a furious Stanley kicked me. "You really aimed to seize our family's wealth. Not enough with me, so you targeted my brother. Such talent. In that case, your gambling mother doesn't need to live." I glared at him, eyes splitting with rage. "What did you do?" "What did I do?" "Just took back everything your mother took from me." I couldn't hear Stanley's voice, but I could picture my mother being driven out. I lunged at him desperately, only to be blocked by Marilyn in my path. Marilyn miscarried. I was beaten and hospitalized, bleeding more than she did that day. I thought I was dying, but Stanley wouldn't let me go. He forced me to watch my mother being driven to jump to her death. With a bang, she was gone. Stanley froze, as if he hadn't expected her to be so resolute. He stopped berating me, even urging me to rest well. From what he said, it was Marilyn's parents who forced my mother to her death. Yet Marilyn still nestled innocently in Stanley's arms, simply because he pampered her. "Marilyn's immature. I'll make it up to you later." "Honestly, your mother was old, she'd have faced this eventually." I didn't scream hysterically, but Stanley panicked, ordering someone to watch me closely as he left with Marilyn, fearing I'd lose control and kill her. I lay stunned on the bed, feeling grief and relief in equal measure. It seemed I could finally die, yet an inner unwillingness drove me forward. With difficulty, I made the call. "I remember now you once asked if I'd go with you. Now, I'm willing. Do you still want me?" Returning to the GU residence when Stanley was absent, I calmly packed and shipped out all my prepared belongings. The maids watched my actions, barely daring to breathe. "Madam, are you really getting divorced?" Before she finished, Marilyn entered, pale-faced. Still shaken from yesterday, she mustered herself to ask, "Why are you willing to give Stanley to me?" I didn't reply, instead leading her through all the places I'd once walked. Everything here was luxurious, but never mind, my role was merely to ensure Stanley's enjoyment. With this in mind, I looked up at Marilyn. "He loves you deeply. Does he love you enough to overlook your background?" Marilyn's eyes flickered, as if struck by a sore spot, her face souring. "What right do you have to judge me? Compared to me, you're the one he'd never accept." I nodded, leading her to the only space in this house that was mine. "This is all yours now." Marilyn's breath hitched. Everything before her, essentials of my role as the GU family matriarch, no longer belonged to me either. "You're clever. Even if you didn't give it to me now, I'd take it eventually." Marilyn had all the jewelry and treasures removed, leaving only the cheap diary on the table. It was where I'd chronicled my love with Stanley, now unworthy of even a glance. Stanley returned. I didn't meet him, instead handing the signed divorce papers to Marilyn. When Marilyn called, her tone dripped with mockery. "You're quite skilled, using me to guilt Stanley, and as you wished, he didn't sign the divorce papers. He's still giving you a chance." Marilyn thought I was playing hard to get. But love can truly run dry after so many years. I couldn't love anymore. Now, I had nothing left but myself. "Nina, what game are you playing? I'm telling you, show up within an hour, and we can still talk. Otherwise, even if we divorce, you'll get nothing." Stanley roared over the phone. Sensing my silence, he panicked unbidden. "If you don't obey, I'll make sure you can't survive in this city." "What else can you do? Send my private photos to your buddies?" Stanley froze. Once, humiliated, he'd told his friends I seduced my way up, even showing them my private photos, tarnishing my reputation in our circle. My life with Stanley endured only because of the pure flame of youthful love. Now, he'd extinguished it himself. He panicked, as if recalling everything. "Nina, what right do you have to hate me? You were bought. Your whole life belongs to me." Marilyn screamed on the other end. "Ah, Stanley, what's burning?" Stanley's breathing faltered as he saw all our memories, including that diary, consumed by the fireplace. I hung up. He couldn't reach me again. Stanley broke down. He'd never imagined divorcing me. He shoved Marilyn away, smashing everything in the house. "Find her. Bring her back to me. Madam's phone is off." "What about her mother?" The maid trembled. "Stanley, Madam's mother died long ago." Stanley's mind flashed to me lying on a hospital bed, barely breathing, his own breath halted. He rushed to douse the fireplace frantically, then clutched the diary, shaking. He saw my past love for him within, and the final "we owe each other nothing." His pupils dilated, as if all strength had drained from him. Never had he so clearly realized I was truly leaving. Looking around, he was shocked to find no trace of me in the house. "Where are Madam's things?" "All thrown out." "Who told you to throw them away?" The maid quavered. "You said they were an eyesore long ago. They're gone." Stanley curled up in agony. Indeed, he'd despised me to madness, forbidding me from calling myself his wife before friends and family, deeming me unworthy. Now, his past actions stabbed back like a boomerang. Suddenly, noises came from outside. "Right here, just put these things here." Stanley frowned and stepped out, only to see Marilyn wearing the jewelry he'd once given me. Wait. Where did you get those? He approached for a closer look, realizing they were gifts from our wedding. His breathing grew erratic as he seized Marilyn's neck. Who permitted you to take her things? Did I say you could touch them? Marilyn cried aggrievedly. Nina gave them to me, saying they're the Gu family madam's things. Stanley stiffened. Get out now, put them back where they belong, or I'll kill you. Marilyn was genuinely terrified. Since being with Stanley, he'd always indulged her. This was the first time she'd seen him so enraged. Pale-faced, Marilyn removed the items. With a dark expression, he went to the home surveillance room, where footage showed me in the bathroom that day. He saw me harming myself to stay conscious and gasped. How could he have doubted it was fake? Then he saw me make the call, his brother rushing in to save me. Recalling Perry's punch that day, Stanley's gaze turned ambiguous. Damn it, that beast actually fell for his brother's woman. Stanley's headache flared again. Nina, massage me. But no one answered him anymore. All he heard was Marilyn sobbing outside. Stanley, I really love you. I know I'm not the Gu family madam, but you said you'd divorce Nina and marry me. Listening, Stanley felt a chill. Though Marilyn wept, she kept touching up her makeup to maintain her innocent look, starkly contrasting my unadorned memory in his mind. Stanley couldn't believe he'd forsaken me for such a vulgar thing. Stanley, come out, please. Weren't you planning a surprise for me today? Stanley's head throbbed painfully. He'd planned a grand proposal for Marilyn today, but now, he had no heart for it. Marilyn, truly spoiled by him, cursed me in her distress. Is that idiot sick? Why buy such uncomfortable shoes? So annoying. Why doesn't she just die already? Every word echoed Stanley's past insults, but from Marilyn's mouth, it felt like a slow torture. Marilyn was the final straw that broke me. He snapped awake, slapping her instantly. Get out, don't show your face here again. Marilyn cried, then grew angry. Stanley, how dare you hit me? My parents won't let this go. Stanley fell silent. He'd pampered Marilyn too much, making her believe he feared her parents. Stanley stood, lighting a cigarette. Do you know the Gu family backs me? If I wanted to deal with you, I wouldn't even need to lift a finger. Grandpa surely wouldn't want another useless granddaughter-in-law. Marilyn panicked, apologizing incessantly. I'm sorry, I won't curse Nina again. You can't abandon me, all my classmates know I'm with you. Stanley laughed, finally understanding my talk of cruelty. He could pamper Marilyn when he loved her, but now that he didn't, she couldn't compare to even half of me. Stanley's cigarette ash fell on Marilyn. Before I decide to trouble your parents, pack your things and leave. Marilyn's eyes widened, desperate to try again. Gritting her teeth, she stood. Stanley, I didn't miscarry. Marilyn thought Stanley would be overjoyed after all. He'd moved her into the main house the moment he learned of her pregnancy. She reached to embrace him. I was terrified then, but later realized it was just a scare. I planned to tell you once the baby stabilized. It's not too late now. Excited, Marilyn moved to undo his pants, but the next second, Stanley hoisted her up and flung her to the corner. Sharp back pain made her clutch her stomach. Stanley, this is your child. But Stanley kicked her, his demeanor now a chilling, devilish specter from hell. Did you really think I cared about your baby? If you hadn't gotten pregnant right when I wanted to discipline my wife, would I have brought you back? Stanley's eyes turned bloodshot. You fucking didn't miscarry and tricked me into driving my wife's mother to death? Now my wife's gone, my family's shattered. How should I deal with you? Marilyn was truly terrified, unable to fathom Stanley's ruthlessness. Just last night, they'd been entwined passionately. Wasn't I your love at first sight? Love at first sight? Stanley sneered. If you didn't resemble my wife from before, would I have even noticed you? Fuck love at first sight. I chased my wife for 3 years. If not for her disgusting family, would you have had a chance? You'd better abort that kid. Marilyn panicked, kneeling and begging desperately. Stanley, spare me, I don't want anything, just let me keep the child. Stanley didn't budge. So you can use the child to threaten my wife's position and steal her inheritance? Marilyn despaired, bloodshot eyes welling. Wasn't it you who fueled my greed? You groomed me to compete, Stanley, you're the one who pushed your wife away. Stanley fell silent, consumed with thoughts of finding me. Irritated, he kicked Marilyn aside. If you show up again, I'll kill you. When I awoke again, Perry was still by my side. His devilishly handsome face glowed in the sunlight, though I couldn't see those stunning dark eyes alone regret. He was asleep, muttering to himself. Stupid Nina, doesn't even know she got the wrong person. I withdrew my hand, stiffening. Nina, is that my name? Wrong person? The man stirred, and I shut my eyes in panic. Awake and still fooling me, Nina, you're inhuman. His blatant reproach kept me from even pretending to sleep. I opened my eyes to find him propped on his arms, leaning over me. My gaze slid from his neck to his abs, my heartbeat erratic. I shook my head frantically, embarrassed. Perry's smile widened. He patted my head fondly. Get up, I've made breakfast, your favorite corn and lean pork congee. He can cook? By the time I processed it, I was already eating at the table. Someone used to love taking me for this, after so many years, I'd forgotten. The same taste, perhaps even better. I looked up at that breathtakingly handsome, slightly blurred face, an epiphany striking me. Have we really met before? Perry's eyes sparkled brilliantly, but he called it a secret. Just then, commotion erupted outside, and his expression shifted. Trouble's here, wait here. At that moment, a gunshot rang out from outside. Perry saw my face pale. He's truly mad, should have let him die. I wanted to laugh but couldn't help following. He's here for me, I'll see him one last time. Perry watched me with a cold face. Just as I thought he'd erupt, he reluctantly took my hand and led me out. Wait, let me gear you up. He called it gear, but I was dumbfounded when forced into matching armored couple outfits, unable to imagine Stanley's reaction. Sure enough, Stanley lost it the moment he saw us. Perry, you fucking dare steal your sister-in-law? Perry treated it like nonsense. What are you saying? My girlfriend's gorgeous, right? Stanley's eyes reddened as he turned to me, that old affectionate gaze returning. Nina, I'm here to take you back. I've driven off everyone who hurt you, let's live well from now on. Stanley hadn't called me Nina since the year he cheated. Now, it felt like our passionate past again, but we were over. Stanley, go back, I won't go with you. My mother owed you before, but she's dead now, and I've repaid the rest. You can let me go. Stanley's eyes brimmed red, dark pupils full of affection. Nina, I'm sorry about your mother, but I swear, from now on, my home will only have you, you're my only wife. I shook my head, taking Perry's hand. Stanley, today marks our 1000th day of marriage, and you still couldn't overcome your desires, you won't stay true to me alone. Love can shift, I won't wait for you anymore. Remember to sign. With that, I turned and left. Returning to the room, a sudden chest pain left me breathless. After all, he was someone I'd loved, truly letting go still hurt. Perry hummed ambiguously. Clearly, he hasn't suffered enough, should have killed him. He ordered his men to hit harder, and I distinctly heard screams outside. Perry, I won't let you off. I didn't know how Perry managed, but Stanley signed the divorce papers. As I stood, clutching my aching chest, I heard him murmur, "Still haven't recognized me?" Suddenly, sycamore leaves fell outside. I seemed to see the man who'd accompanied me that year. Did you also attend Wutong High School? Perry smiled, lowering his head with those drowningly tender eyes. Yes, so I've waited 18 years for you. I understood what Perry meant by wrong person. That year, Perry confessed to me, but Stanley was the one who showed up. He said he was the online friend who quietly kept me company. I believed him, leading to everything that followed. But it wasn't entirely a mistake. I did briefly love Stanley. That year, the blush by the boy's ear wasn't fake. It was just deep affection with shallow fate, altered by time. Fortunately, everything was now aligning properly. Perry and I started dating. As if to prove a point, he mirrored everything Stanley did, saying it was to make up for our lost memories. I first met Perry's family, his grandmother. He said, I was never valued by my family growing up, always carefree. Grandma's my closest kin. I touched him sympathetically, only for him to kiss me dizzyingly. Later, I realized he simply couldn't stand Stanley. In our third month of dating, Perry proposed. The engagement was grand, inviting the same guests from my past wedding. Seeing their awkward expressions, Perry grinned. See? This is everything back on track. Midway through the engagement, Stanley appeared, wearing the suit from our wedding year, eyes full of despair. Nina, come back to me, please. Looking at his no longer refined face, I felt estranged. Stanley, we're impossible. If you'd bless me, I'd welcome it. Stanley wept, anguished. Perry, annoyed, kicked him twice, frowning impatiently. Keep crying, and you'll ruin your brother's wedding. I saw resentment in Stanley's tears. He lunged to punch Perry but missed. Perry pinned him down with his foot. You fucking animal, you stole my girlfriend back then, and I didn't kill you. Now I've taken her back, and you're causing trouble again. Perry's enraged face was terrifying. He ground Stanley's hand ruthlessly, eyes dark and chilling. If you want to die, I'll oblige. Struggling, Stanley reached for me. See? He's a lunatic, you won't be happy with him. Think he was abandoned by our parents for no reason? He's sick, severe mania. Perry's icy gaze solidified, crashing onto Stanley. As he seemed ready to kill Stanley, I hugged him. So that's why you never came to see me? Perry's tension dissolved, and he hugged me back awkwardly. I'm not sick. After a moment, he grumbled, they drove me to it, you're all I need. In those few words, my eyes welled uncontrollably. I understood Perry was whole only with me. Ignoring Stanley, I kissed Perry passionately and resolutely before him. Seeing that familiar love in my eyes, Stanley left, vanishing from the city. No one knew where he went thanks to him. Perry inherited a mess. By then, my daughter was 3. Yet Perry had no time for her daily. That night, he held me glumly. I found that idiot, he's living peacefully on an island. I'll drag him back someday. Perry's hands trembled. I knew he feared I'd love Stanley again. But I threw myself into his arms, wrapping around his waist affectionately. I'm not worried about him, I just want you to relax. If you wear yourself out, what about my second child? I want our daughter to have a brother. Perry grew excited, resulting in my sleepless night. Actually, the year Stanley vanished, he'd told me he went to the place we'd once dreamed of, waiting for me. My response was simple, I had everything I loved right beside me.